Hello and welcome to our first episode of All About PR. This podcast will take a deep dive into the world of PR. Every week, we will pick up different verticals of PR and help you understand the nuances of each one of them, along with how you can integrate them into your PR and reputation management plans and for your brands or your clients. I am your host, Tarunjit Ratan, and today's episode is brought to you by special arrangement with PRPOI, Public Relations Professionals of India, a group that is dedicated to upskilling the PR community. So, let's go. So today's session is going to be a very interesting one. We have with us Varsha Pillai. She will talk to us about media advocacy and its relevance in PR today. A little bit about her. She has over 16 years of experience in the communication space, a bulk of which she spent as a TV journalist. She's a research addict and has been with NFAI, that is National Film Archives of India, and has a research fellowship from them in 2019. And she's also gotten a Netherlands fellowship in 2017, which is the NUFFIC Fellow. In 2019, she was one of the 10 young leaders selected globally to attend the Winterschool for Thinktankers in Geneva under the On Think Tanks in Think Tank Initiative Fellowship. She's also a PhD research scholar with Symbiosis International University, studying gender advocacy through digital media. And currently, she heads communications at Dream a Dream, an organization empowering young people using creative life skills approach. So we'll wait for, she's already here with us. Hi, Varsha.
Hello, how are you? How is it going?
It's going great. Good to have you here with us today.
Nice to be here. I'm happy if people want to listen to and understand what media advocacy is all about. So yeah, happy to chat with you.
Okay. Before we get into it, I would like to understand a little bit about your journey. Your profile is amazingly impressive, but I'd like to understand a little bit about your journey. When you transitioned from being a TV journalist to communications. How was that journey?
So you and I have pretty much made the same entry point, right? We are master's students. We learned the art of communications. And for me, journalism was a dream, which I managed to fulfill. I was a very happy television journalist and I used to focus on features at that point of time. I did also dabble with a lot of news journalism as well. But it's like an old foggy, we say that those were the good times. But after being in the industry for quite some time, I realized that I had gotten into a mechanical groove. Right. And then I took a break, and then motherhood happened, and then I sort of segued into that. And then I slowly decided that if I wanted to get back to work, when you've been working, you always want to work. You can't just sit back and do nothing. So I slowly entered the field in terms of the development sector because I thought it was interesting. Right. I had certain, thought processes, certain interests issues that I was very interested in. So I thought, okay, why not take this journey? And I was lucky enough to get a very good break with Child Rights in You. And therein began my journey with understanding communication, understanding how my experience as a television journalist can help me pitch stories better from the development sector. And once I was CRI, I then moved on to a think tank, not-for-profit think tank. And I also understood and learned how evidence and data can actually help you pitching for issues, the developmental issues in a much better manner. And right now, I'm with an organization that is working, has been around for the last 20 years and has been really working from the ground level up, specifically in the life skill space.
Interesting. So before we, get into all the fabulous work that you've been doing, can you tell our viewers a little bit about what is media advocacy? Let's start from there.
Okay. So let's start from the word advocacy in itself. So basically, in a nutshell, it just means supporting your viewpoint quite openly and advocating for a particular issue. It could be anything. But the end result of advocacy, the end aim of advocacy, very specifically, is to ensure a policy change. Because that is what we are looking at. What we mean by media advocacy is that we are using media to forward a particular change. It could be at the level of policy advocacy, like I mentioned. For instance, at a very small level, it could very easily just mean you write articles, you go to the journalist and you try to explain to them this is the issue. For instance, child labor.
Right.
You cite examples and you cite data, and this is something that any journalist would want to. And you also have case stories that you can use. If this starts amplifying, and if there is greater amount of coverage on this particular issue, there is a possibility that there would be a committee set up by the government, and then you would be to present this data. There is a possibility that an ultimate thing at the district level or probably state level would be a government order would be passed. Funds would be raised. So if I give you an example, what happened with the Nirbhaya incident, right? It took a whole lot of different women's organizations, obviously also the outcry of the common citizens that came about at that point of time, resulted in a whole set of changes, right? I'm not saying much has changed on the ground, right? You and I know that. But what it has done is it has set things in motion. And it's very sad that a precious life had to go for us to understand the gravity of the situation of women safety in public spaces. Right? And it's not, this is a tipping point. It's just one of the examples that I can give you. But what media advocacy does then is it actually also ensures that the society at large is invested in this particular issue. And it starts from there. So as an NGO or as a social sector organization, you also need to ensure that you can mobilize the community. So if you see most social sector organizations and NGOs will also have a very thriving volunteering base, because you need to ensure that your community is equally invested in that particular change that you want to make, right? The other thing, you will also use advocacy for one with policy level. The other is legal advocacy. A lot of organizations also file public interest litigations, right? Mm-hmm. That is another manner of also ensuring that media interest is there in that particular issue. So, and then obviously you have political advocacy, where you are lobbying very continuously with the government for a particular change. That is a different set of lobbying that happens. That's a different set of advocacy that happens. But for the last 2 decades or so, I've seen organizations across the country, across India, social sector organizations, actually invest a lot of money in both communications, research, documentation, and advocacy, because they are understanding that this is really important, and it is the key.
That's interesting, because but I'm trying to understand, how is this different from regular public relations? Because when you talk about PR as well, there is a huge amount of media relations that is involved. This was one of the questions that I received yesterday as well, because according to a lot of PR professionals, when you ramp up media relations in their own programs, according to them, that could possibly be media advocacy. So could you help us understand the distinction between both of them?
So essentially, a PR practitioner is doing the same thing. Okay, it's semantics. That's the only thing. The only difference would be in terms of media advocacy for within the social sector space would be specifically about an issue. Mm-hmm. It is very, very important about the issue. It's not that, say for instance, it's not a XYZ organization that is doing this. The issue supersedes the organization.
Okay.
definitely there will be, I will have to obviously talk about my organization as well, because my funding team will, have a go at me if I don't ensure that. But the point of the issue is really important, and it is very, very key. And also how you develop these relationships over a period of time. It's pretty much the same as a PR practitioner does. I don't think, but in terms of this is a product, or this is the brand that we're talking about, it's more about a specific issue, and it is a very steady build up towards one. You also talk about the urgency of the issue. Why is this issue important currently right now? You need to build that story up with the media that you're working with. And like most people would say, maybe 10 years down the line, 10 years ago, it was a much better space to talk about issues, as the shrinking space, as we're talking of the media, it is becoming difficult. But what it has also done is, it has also thrown open digital advocacy at your fingertip, know. So, yeah.
So what is digital advocacy?
So digital advocacy in a nutshell is basically using digital media to advocate, and it is working very well. For instance, it started with a simple thing of Twitter.
Right.
Organizations knew that a lot of the policymakers were on Twitter. So how do you then get them to engage with you, with a conversation with you directly? Right. If not with the policymaker or the decision maker, can we then directly talk to the departments that are involved in this particular issue that we're talking about? For instance, if it is to do with education, then the MHRD. If it is to do with a specific thing on women and child, then the WCD, the Women and Child Department. Or if it is specifically to do with women's safety, then NCW. All of these are there. So it started with Twitter. It slowly segued into different other formats. One is, but Twitter is still right now seen as one of the mainstays in which you can directly talk to with and engage with policymakers. So there is a small sort of movement that we have made. But even then, a lot of, despite the fact that right now the print media is going through a very bad time, you know it better than me. But even then, there is this mindset that if there is an opinion piece that is about a particular issue is carried on,
right?
That holds a lot of value. That still holds a lot of value as far as impact is concerned that we're talking about. That means that the newspaper understands this issue to be really important. For instance, just to give you an example of how digital advocacy has worked, I mean, would we have been as cognizant as we are of, say, climate change, and the importance of climate change, if it were not for over the years of, data that has been thrown to us? Probably India is one of the few places wherein largely people know of the impact and people understand and acknowledge that climate change is real. Unlike a whole lot of developed countries where, it's still, oh no, it's just a myth, it's just something that is, they don't want us to succeed. They don't, industrialists, it's a big thing against industrialists, all of that talk that happens. But it has been over a period of time. Just on Greta Thunberg holding her placard and sitting it, Fridays for the Future, how it moved, how it transited. Oh, and it's across the globe. Look at that global movement that is, carrying forward. Digital advocacy also works very well if you have a coalition. And that is why climate change has worked very well.
Interesting. So do you think it has had, specifically when you talk about climate change and you talk about media realizing that the issue is real, currently, as you mentioned, media is going through a lot of stress. There are a lot of, brand guidelines that they also have to adhere to. There are certain issues as for the promoters of every publication that they're not allowed to talk about. There are certain political affiliations that make it difficult for a journalist, even if they believe very strongly about it, there's nothing much to do about it. So within those circumstances, within all those parameters that kind of hinder free press as such, do you think media advocacy this year, this month, this day is much better off as compared to 10 years ago?
No, it's not. There is a shrinking space, like I mentioned. It is being felt. But the other important thing is that we have smaller online news portals that are up, that are actually investing in these places. So you'll have to pick and choose what you want to put out there. But largely, if it is a situation of, if it is an issue that is not controversial or something that has got extra attention and it's under the government spotlight, chances are most and you have a decent enough person writing it, the press release, or a decent enough person to talk about the issue,
Right.
it will be carried. However, like you mentioned, the quantum is decreasing.
Correct.
Okay? But you have these online portals that are still there, that are focusing also on positive news, the impact. Right. So you can do a spin of it. It need not just always be about the sad bit of it, right? It can also be about stories of change, how things have happened with the organization, with people overcoming different kinds of adversities, right? So it can also be about that. But I would be lying if I would say that it is not impacted. It has impacted. It has, the 10 years difference, you can definitely make out.
Okay. Okay, that was, thank you for actually sharing that and addressing that question. So we have a couple of questions coming in for us. So I'm going to paraphrase a few of them which are relevant. So, is media advocacy more relevant for the NGO and political sector compared to the others?
Okay. Yes, because it's essentially advocacy comes about from holding a certain viewpoint from a group of people, and it is advocating for a specific cause. So it is more suited towards and more relevant towards the social sector space, issue space, and yes, the political. So because they're closely tied and interlinked, right? To say so, yeah, they are.
Okay. So any international brands have used media advocacy well? I would like to rephrase that by saying any Indian and international brands that come to mind, or issues that come to mind that have used media advocacy very well.
So I won't go to brands, okay, because let me talk about organizations, and also let me talk about how it started, in a sense, how media advocacy actually began. So it started in the US, and it started specifically in health communication, and it started very, very organically when a group of students did not want cigarettes to be selling very close to their educational institutions. It started with that. Then they got the media involved. So it started. Obviously, there were organizations that were there. So that was one that comes to the mind very quickly. The other thing was gun control. As you know, in the States, in the United States, that is something of a very big. It is something that is worrisome, right? So it started with that. So the media was very invested within that, and what they did then was they focused on health communication aspect. So it at that point of time, nobody knew that this was advocacy, but over a period of time, it sort of developed that, this is what we're trying to say, this is what we're building. And in India, it so happened that I'm sure all of us knew about this, when UNICEF was going on and on about how important it is for you to ensure the inoculation of your child, you to. It's again in India. It started with the health communication bit of it, and if you remember in the 90s when we were kids, how the focus was on HIV/AIDS. So a lot of if you remember, a lot of the organizations are focusing on that. And then who can forget the big public advocacy thing that went on with polio, the polio campaign that went on across, right? And then we could say that polio was eradicated over a period of time. So health communication was very closely linked with advocacy. So these are the few things that come to mind. But over a period of time, there are all tons of organizations that have been working. Child Rights and You that I was working with very specifically has campaigns that they run through the entire year, be it in child labor, be it in child trafficking. Then you have Amnesty International that talks a lot about different issues in really very, very specific places, like in Kashmir, in the Northeast. They talk about human rights violations. So all of them are doing that. I'm not saying that they're all in the same space. They're all in different spaces. You have a very beautiful organization called Prajwala that focuses very specifically on sexual crimes. You know, so and then there are tons of organizations like that that are working. I volunteer. I work with an organization, but I also volunteer with an organization called Shakti, which is very specifically working to political Shakti, it is called, to ensure that there are more women parliamentarians. You know, we are 50% of the population. We need to be there rather than, you know, our issues need to be spoken. So this is something that's also another set of advocacy that is going on, and that means you do it in a manner in which you also speak to the media. You also keep your issues, your briefs, policy briefs ready.
Right.
You know, so media advocacy also works very closely with research and policy research, both.
Right.
Research could be top down in the sense of what is happening on the ground, what is happening with the community. It also means mobilization. So therefore, you could be working with multiple teams, right? So it works. It's not. I'm not saying it's a single person thing. Like today, I write a press release, I find somebody, and then it goes on and oh wow, media advocacy ho gaya. No, it doesn't stop. It just continues. It just goes on and on and on. For instance, a very small example, I'm sure you know about this, is the midday meal scheme, right?
Right.
Right. A lot of the, I mean, unfortunately now the schools are closed, but it was the only meal that a lot of young children could, have access to. But to get to that point, to understand, to actually, ensure that the government releases funds for this mammoth scheme across states and all the states of India and the length and breadth of the country, took more than a decade or so for it to actually ensure that it is important, to tell them that a hot meal is really important for everybody. Obviously it's a scheme that started a long time back, but to ensure that it continues, because even as I'm saying this, I know that there are a lot of lobbies who are talking to the government saying that what about having pre-packaged food ready to serve at for schools. Well, that may be a very nice way to say that, then you'll not have these issues of khana banate samay kuch gir gaya, bacha bimar ho gaya, and all of that. But a lot of the advocacy and activists believe, and even doctors believe, and even even I know, that a hot meal cannot replace what comes out of the packet.
So have you ever seen brands using media advocacy?
Yeah, a lot of them. Issue advocacy, I'm sure you've seen that, right? For instance, Tata Tea, Jagore campaign that they had, So they would want to associate themselves with a particular issue because they feel this is also something that the brand believes in, right? So in the Tata Tea, it was amazingly fit, right? When you had the Jagore campaign, so how do you awaken the spirit within you? And it's brilliant one, actually. I mean, if you think of it, put on your brand person's hat, and then you see that it's really brilliant, right? Because Jagore, उसमें तो आप कुछ भी fit कर लो हो जाएगा. It's like, so that is one. Then I think Havells also tried to do something with that. Then you have a lot of the brands today want to do this because the average Indian right now is pretty much abreast with what is happening around.
Right.
So if it was something that he or she could sort of bring a change into their life, they would want to do that, right?
Correct.
So it helps to have this sort of an added advantage where you're actually saying that, hey, this is also helping us social change. It's not about me selling you salt or pickle or whatever, but it's also about this. So this issue advocacy, a lot of the brands, international brands as well, want to bring it into their frame because it helps them.
Correct. Apart from Tata Tea, Any interesting international examples come to mind of brands who have used issue advocacy very well?
A lot of them actually. So it started, I think, United Colors of Benetton used to do that, to sort of talk about racism. I have a grouse with them actually, because I don't think I saw any face on that. I don't think I saw. I seen a brown face. I mean, not necessarily seem like South Asian, Indian in the sense, could be Sri Lankan, could be. I've seen a black. I've seen an Asian. I've seen African Americans. All of them are there. I've seen they look Latin American as well, but I don't know. But I'm sure they're all changing that as well, because a lot of people are focusing on these very, very minute details right now. हमारे ज़माने में they would have said कि क्या यार तुम भी बाल की खाल निकाल देते हो, picking essentially. But it is important. This dialogue is very important. This set of thinking. In fact, this week itself, I think you can check it out. But on Twitter, on LinkedIn, I actually found this very interesting conversation going on about Scotch Brite.
I remember that. Yeah, I was about to mention that.
You have the lady with that small bindi, and it clearly pinpoints to the gender roles that we have ascribed to and ensured ki bartan dhona to iska hi kaam hai. So, and it's amazing that a man took it out. And
I think it was Karthik Srinivasan who picked it out. Yeah. So for our viewers, this was an ad that Scotch Brite, it was a packaging, design that Scotch Brite has taken out, which had a small icon of a woman with a bindi clearly next to it, which showcased to all the viewers that possibly it's a woman's job to wash the dishes. Yeah. Okay. So another interesting question: how does one get started on a media advocacy for a client?
Okay. So for clients, in the sense of an organization, would that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So since we've defined that media advocacy is more relevant or more useful as such for development sectors, NGO sectors, let's put that as a client for all the PR professionals who are watching, and then move forward from there.
Yeah. So essentially, what it would mean is to sort of ensure that we are looking at building critical messages.
Right.
That you want to put across. You want to showcase your impact on these particular issues. You want to showcase the urgency of the issues. You also want to have a credible ambassador that you want to help, that can help you with this. So all of this actually falls across. You remember we had studied in communications agenda setting.
Right.
This is exactly where it falls into that. You set the agenda. So. Which will never happen in the first instance. It's pretty much the same thing as you and I would do when we were doing our regular PR with the media. Right. So, but in this case, it would take quite a few of conversations, building the case bit by bit. So let me give you an example to tell you how this how this worked for me. When I was at CRI, we were specifically focusing on female feticide, the issue. Okay, that happened, and trigger warning for this particular story. Okay, but I was engaging in a conversation with this reporter from a prestigious magazine, and I was not looking for a one-page article. Okay, I wanted her to go into this in depth. So this particular thing happened in a village which is a little bit far off of Salem, in Tamil Nadu. Oh yeah, at the outset, let me please tell you that I have been in the south of India in Bangalore for the last 10 years. So a bulk of my media advocacy experience comes from the south. I used to handle the south of India for CRI, specifically media advocacy for CRI at that point of time. And this particular issue of female feticide was very weirdly connected with an astrologer telling women, pregnant women, just looking at their hands and telling them कि boss अगला बच्चा लड़की है तो गिरा दो. So Yeah, and what happened then was a lot of the women under pressure from family, mother-in-law, whatever, the whole social system as such, used very crude forms of um, killing the babies, killing the
Okay.
fetuses, basically. Okay, very crude forms of. Okay, yeah, it is quite this. So what I did was I built over and I ensured that from my the partner NGOs that we are working with, including my entire development support team, built case stories for her to look at, for her to
Mhm.
understand, and then actually tell me that, hey, I want to travel to this village.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm saying this was built over a period of around 2.5 to 3 months. And finally, she actually ended up doing an undercover. She became one of the ladies who
Mhm.
actually had 3 kids and is now going to show her hand. And I posed as one of her sister or somebody who's come from some far thing. I don't know. Anyways, we somehow managed to, and we understood then the issue that was at hand. We also met women who have gone through those crude forms of feticide, very, very crude forms of feticide, which actually can really harm the woman. Okay?
Mhm.
And what then happened after that was very interesting because there was this real strict, amazing amount of surveillance that happened, by the district collector, the block levels and all that. That's how it
Right.
works.
Right.
And they ensured that these sort of things would not happen. There was a greater amount of vigilance and surveillance done on this particular thing. I'm not saying the issue went away, but what
Mhm.
happened was at least there was some amount of check among people. And then
Right.
obviously this was also followed by a partner NGO who was, and she's an awesome woman. She was a victim herself, and she started an NGO on her own in that
Okay.
particular
Okay.
to break this cycle, to stop this thing. So she lost her 2 daughters because of this. Yeah. So this is one example. I can give you another example. Um, and that is very specifically linked with how press conferences can actually work for you. you know
Right.
so there is this one particular set of schools that is there in Tamil Nadu, which was set sometime during the when the British were around. Okay, and they were very specifically meant for a specific section of community, basically the
Right.
Dalit community, one specific sect. But ever since the British moved away, those schools have not been refurbished. There were teacher posts that were left open, and these schools are quite big, and they have a lot of students attending, but it was in complete shambles. So again, what CRI did was, with the partner organization, they did a research on the schools, the
Right.
kind of the impact of the fact that there was loss of learning.
Right.
All of this, they collected it. We drafted a proper, and they ensured that the report was submitted to the chief minister, and I think they submitted to the deputy chief minister. This is way back, I think. And we had the press conference on the same day.
Okay.
So you imagine this: the chief minister has just been given the report. The next
Right.
day, the best part about Chennai news media is they all come on time for press conferences. and and they're very, very strict about their time. I learned it on the job. When I moved from Bangalore to, it's different, but when I moved there suddenly there's 5 minute ka bhi farak nahi hai. But anyways, all of them carried, and we read all the newspapers because we had evidence in form of a report. And we also told them that our team has gone to the chief minister's office to give this right now, to give this particular report. You won't believe it. In 15 days, we got a government order. Funds were released to ensure that the teacher posts that were empty need to be filled. We got, all the schools that were in a dilapidated state needed to be renovated. All of that funds were released. That happened.
True. So media is a very important part of making, bringing about behavioral change, social change as such. But you spent a good amount of years, I think 15, 16 years in this sector. I still remember when, I was helping launch female condoms. in a red light district in Mumbai. We wanted, that was specifically for the prevention of AIDS. It was an AIDS campaign, and we specifically wanted, to make sure that all the women there in those areas understood and required and made sure that the safety of their own bodies was in their own hands, right? Getting them to adopt is a different thing, but getting media to that segment and helping them understand, or helping them, encouraging them to come down and speak to those women to understand the magnitude of the issue or the seriousness of the issue and why this is very essential for them was a huge task in itself. I remember at that point of time, out of possibly hundreds of journalists I would have, approached to invite them or to take up the story, I would possibly have gotten a handful of them down there. Do you think, in the last 10, 15 years that you've been in that sector, media is more confident or media is more aware and wants to talk about these issues? Do you see that overall in the media landscape? Has it decreased? Has it increased? Or is it status quo at this point?
Okay, so I think it is more issue-oriented.
Right.
Yeah. So, for instance, if I'm talking about very specifically about, say, child labor, or if I'm talking about, but if and you can't blame the media. The media comes from you and me. I was part of the media, right? So I'm also one of those who don't. I don't like to blame. I don't like to say that. But the point is also that, like I mentioned earlier, it is a shrinking space. Mm-hmm. But you can do with it in a very strategic manner. It can be built upon.
Right.
I'm not saying that it is still going to be very, very difficult to talk about certain human rights issues that certain organizations want to talk about, because at the crux of it, certain media organizations know that if there could be an adversarial impact on them, right, from certain sectors, so they want to protect themselves as well, right? At the end of the day, media is a business, right? So, but I still believe that it can be done in different forms and formats. Right?
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Sorry?
Can you elaborate on that? Can you help us understand what the different forms that, let's say, an industry can plan for better media advocacy?
Again, industry, you're talking about a specific organization?
Organization, yeah.
Okay. So it is going to be extremely difficult, for instance, but you can, if you're talking about human rights violations in certain specific space and you don't want to talk about it, you can use different ways in terms of having a photo essay of the life of this, because at most points it's also about ensuring the safety of the victims of a particular issue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is a big part of being in a social sector or developmental sector organization, because to you, the community that you're trying to work for, or the issue that you're trying to work for, does not mean that you don't protect those interests of those constituents, right? Child protection policy is a big thing within the child protection and child rights space, right? So you need to keep that in mind. So one is that. The other bit is using art. You can definitely use art. You can use different mediums to do it. Planning is still going to be extremely difficult, especially if you're talking about mainstream media. Gone are the days when we used to have half-an-hour shows in television that were very specifically issue-oriented. Now these are all slanging matches, shouting matches, as you and I don't watch, but we know about. But again, it can be through very, on Twitter, on certain spaces, in the digital portals, on different mediums. You have spaces that are there. Obviously, they're not as impactful. It could be through an opinion piece. It could be through consistent writing. It could be through your change.org petition. A lot of the petitions that have come forward, for instance, I'm sure you recently read about, what happened with the Fair and Lovely case.
Right.
It's been around for so long. It took one girl to have the courage to come forward and continuously petition and, get this going. Right? And that is also specifically to do with issue advocacy. You're talking one particular, and you're just at it. It could be pollution. It could be any of this. But you will have to evolve the strategy. I just, I mean, I can't put it in this, but it has to be, a multiple aspects. It can be like a basket of stuff that you want to include. It could be through a press release. You may not get 50 coverages that you wanted, but you may get 2.
Right.
Okay. Now, how do you develop with those 2? You continuously talk to them. The other way to do it is also look at community radios.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of community radio stations are talking about really important development sector issues. How do you use them then? So and then a lot of people are now on Instagram, especially the young people, so that is another definite form that you don't want to miss. And one very important bit that I completely forgot to mention earlier was that along with advocacy, you also need to ensure that you are, even organizations where I work and all the other organizations need funding.
Correct.
So we also need to be equally invested in all the media that is out there.
Correct.
So it need not. So the way most of the old ways of looking at media advocacy was only print and TV, and at one point of time radio as well, right? But over a period of time, it has moved to all these other spaces. For instance, Teach for India, Akansa Foundation, they focus a lot of their communications and advocacy and showing impact on Facebook.
Correct. Actually, community radio that you mentioned is very interesting. How does that work?
So it's talking to those to the community radio stations. Like for instance, in Bangalore right now, there is we have a radio station called Radioactive. That's a community radio station. Very interestingly, we have run by a lot of trans people who are on the show, and amazing conversations on different issues that are there. So essentially what happens is you record for them. It's like a podcast that comes outside and plays for it. But it's a space. It's a free space that they're willing to give you to do. Across the country, there are millions of, such platforms that are there. And podcast has become, if you've seen the kind of trend that has happened in the last 3 months, just go ahead and see the amount of people have spoken on podcast. It's amazing because I think lockdown brings out the gift of the gap, as you can see.
Okay, so coming to that, I think the lockdown, the pandemic, as such, has also ensured that a lot of brands have jumped on to the issue advocacy part of it. There's an interesting thing from one of our viewers that, when you talk about safe hand washing, building immunity, maintaining social distance, they've kind of used that and not promoted the product, but actually spoken about the issue. So we see more brands entering into that space and wanting to talk about the greater good, which is resonating well with their customers.
Correct. Yes, and that is something that I think it's interesting that we as a normal viewer have managed to discern it, right? We've managed to see that.
Yeah.
See कि आप कोई भी sanitizer use कर लो, चाहे life boy ही नहीं हो, but use it. So it's very important. It's important. So what has also happened is the issue has superseded the brand.
Correct.
And that is also because I think the fact is that now brands themselves have also matured, right, over a period of time. They know that this set of audience is not the same set of audience that I spoke to and I interacted with 20 years ago. They know what is happening and they know this very instant, right? It's all at my fingertips. And like I mentioned earlier, it's the nitpicking also that works, right? And if there is a misstep here or there, people are going to pick you up for it. So how do you become smart and work? And I think they have done a brilliant job by doing it because everybody remembers it and everybody applauds them for it, right?
They have, yeah. I think it's about time brands matured. I think for a long time, they thought, they didn't take the customers seriously or they doubted the intelligence of their customers. And it's, for a PR professional, it's very difficult to push back at that point of time. I think wherever I have been, I've always pushed back and helped them know that please don't insult the intelligence of your customer. Your customers are. And I think this pandemic has been great in that sense because it has helped brands understand and finally realize they can't do that anymore.
Yes, definitely. I would like to add one more line to that. Don't take your don't take even the media for granted, and don't take they're also not fools. And this closely, I'm sure my talk closely follows that of Harshada's, and I completely agree with what she's talking about, because at that point of time I was there, right? So that is why I said, if you want to forward your advocacy for a particular issue, get all your data in place, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Everything in place, stack them up, and you will see that it actually logically flows, and the journalist would be interested. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but day after, you continuously talk and you build upon it. It's not like child trafficking ka case hum log ne pakda hai and all, immediately that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, and also the fact is that, and I think that is something brilliant that has happened in the last 3 months, and like Harshada also pointed out, is the build-up of empathy.
Correct.
That we have seen amongst people, right? I'm not saying that it took, it took someone's life to go away for people to realize the importance of mental health. But as an issue advocacy, if you look at it from that lens,
right.
This particular 3 months, if you just go onto Instagram and you see the number of people that are just consuming stuff focused on mental health in India, it's
right.
Wow. Okay, that particular bit, yeah, it's amazing, and and if you're smart enough to sort of understand that and build on it, it'll be great. Especially if you're an organization working specifically within the mental health, segment. This is the time, because people are open to conversations. Earlier, if I was suffering, if I was a young person, I would talk about depression like, "Kya hai, bahut paisa hai, kuch kaam nahi hai," and all of that. It would be taken in that sort of a manner. Right now, that if I am at this particular stage, if somebody is at that particular stage, so what do you do? So this,
right.
So I think I digressed, but
that's fine.
So coming back to, I think, it's also timing is very important. Like how to catch the media's attention to the issue that you want them to talk about and focus on.
Right.
So so it's this thing of, is this the right time to pitch this particular thing? For instance, I'll give you an idea. I'll give an example. Now at Dream a Dream, we are focusing on one particular campaign, which is called the #WhatIf campaign.
Right.
Okay. And we are talking about it from the space of possibilities. So actually what happened was the co-founder Vishal Talreja and the CEO Sucheta Bhatt, what they did when the lockdown happened, imagine this from a not-for-profit or an NGO's perspective. Your programs are actually shut, right? Because schools are shut, especially if you're working with young people, young individuals. If schools are shut, if you're not able to interact with the young people that you were generally interacting with, what are you going to do? So they went into a space where they actually sat down and thought about it and said, hey, now can we, it's bad, it's horrible, because we've had to have young people who are calling us because it was not safe at home as well. Right? Overwhelmingly, abuse was a lot at home. So they came from a space of, okay, now this is really bad. And everybody keeps talking about this really oft-repeated, the new normal. Let me just put it out there for everyone. There was never an old normal. It was just business as usual. The old normal was just business as usual. It was never normal in any place, right? We accepted it. For a lot of people, it was bad then. It is worse now, right? So they came from that space and they developed this campaign, okay? I'm talking about it 2-3 months ago. We were just 2 partners. We now have over 15 partners who have come on board this global movement towards education. Our only aspect that we want to focus on is that how do we now ensure that there is greater emphasis on social emotional learning within the education space to ensure that our young people who go out and make a life for themselves out of school or out of educational institutions are happy enough, are healthy enough, so that they don't commit, they don't sort of go into different spaces or have a mental health breakdown. So how do you do it? So this hashtag what if actually we had a it just went sort of picked up and went. We've got Teach for India, we've got Reap Benefit. A lot of the organizations have just come on board and said, hey, this is something that we want to partner with, and this has happened only through conversations over a period of time. Okay, so it's just, and what we also did was to sort of also build on this case. We also said that the education department think ki chalo online learning karte hain is not easy, right? How many of the people that we know, I'm not talking about the middle class or even the lower middle class, I'm really talking about those who live actually on daily wages, right? How if even if they have a family of 4, even if they have 2 children going to school, how many of them can actually use the phones and have enough data in that to access online classes, right?
Correct.
So we actually built a research on that, and we talked about, hey, now what if this year you think of it in a different manner, you develop it in a different manner, and it actually picked up because this campaign, we sort of managed to get time with the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi, Manish Sisodia ji. And he ended up writing an open letter to the MHRD minister saying that, can we not have exams this year? And 2 weeks after that, CBSE exams were cancelled.
All the students know who to thank them for, right?
It's a community effort. Everybody has done. But the point of it, it was it actually came from the point that a lot of young people committed suicide, and this is a truth. They actually, death by suicide of a lot of the students who couldn't access online classes because of lack of digital infrastructure at home.
Right.
So this immense sense of loss of learning was really there, So media is they're very happy to pick this up because it's current. You're talking about what is happening right now, and you're talking about something that is really in front of you. And we did it very quick. The turnaround was very quick. And that is something that can actually help anybody who's developing a media advocacy plan. If it is something that is really, you're in the thick of it, how do you then respond to it immediately? And very, very, very focused manner.
So, you are in a very unique position because you've been with the media, you are into communications, you understand both sides of it. What would your advice be to PR professionals at this point who, usually get stuck between the client and the media, right? There is a client, whether it's an NGO or a brand or however it is, right? They want to push their agenda, yeah? They want to make sure that their issue or their campaign gets maximum mileage out of it, right? There is a business part of it also, like you said, right? There is a media on the other end who might not like to talk about it. And they're stuck in the middle is a PR professional who would want to tell their clients that this might not be the right time for it, but because there are so many things that surround it, because of money that has been poured in, the time and effort that has been poured in, and the personal passion of the founders or let's say the executives who actually put that together, they find it tough to push back at that point of time. And this is where I think when we try approaching media professionals on the other end, this is where a lot of friction happens. A lot of anger, a lot of heartbreak happens at that point. So what would your advice be to these professionals who are stuck at this point?
So it's actually a catch-22 situation. I can understand completely. And trust you me, over a period of time, I have dealt with a lot of media PR practitioners as well. And they have understood, it is a very tenuous relationship. I'm not saying that relationship is very tenuous still between the media and the PR agency and the PR practitioners. But over a period of time, they have understood how do we now approach this particular issue. Sometimes it actually it takes the form of, not just me, but as a group, can you give us this particular issue some amount of weightage and focus on,
Right.
So The other bit of it is you have to sometimes wait and watch, play the waiting game. Like I mentioned, just maneuver. We had the same issue with our PR agencies as well. They've said, Ki, this is a very bad time to give anything. Why are you giving now? And all of that. But the point is, you need to understand and speak to them as well.
Right.
They are in a space where they have become astute enough also to understand cause advocacy. So they have also said कि चलो हमको समझ में आता है कि ये important क्यों है. We understand why, but give us time, And I think it also takes a lot of time to build that kind of relationship with your client to say that I will get it done, but hold your horses. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take time. Because this is anyways a bad time. Most people would come around and say, "Theek hai, if this is not happening, can you get me something else?" So they have, and practitioners are very, very smart enough to do that. They would have said, "Ki 5 isme aayega, ye aayega, de falana, dhimkana," and all that. But in the end, they will give you results because they would have worked their asses off to ensure that this is put across. And the other thing that I have noticed, and Tarun will be very happy to notice this, because yours was one of the few organizations that would actually sit down and understand and spend some time to understand what is it that the client wants. I see that happening now with a lot of PR agencies. The professionalism bit of it. It is not just. Yeah, it's not just the fact of इसमें आएगा, उसमें आएगा, press release आप लिखोगे, मैं लिखूँ, कौन लिखेगा, all that, who's going to write it? All of that. It's not like that. It's become very professional over a period of time. It has taken its time, And yes, there may be that off-hand scuffles that often happen between media and PR practitioners. कुछ नहीं कर सकते. That's normal.
Part of life. So we have another question which asks you, was it easier for you to pick stories considering your media background?
Of course, super easy. No, it took time for me to understand the issue. It took time for me to understand different spaces that were coming from. For instance, when I moved to Karai, I had to understand what child rights was all about. The child rights space is a different space. So it meant a lot of reading as well. And it also helped that I had a habit of writing, so I could convert those thoughts into pieces that could be carried on in different spaces, right? So would it be bragging if I say that most of the press releases that I wrote came as it is? ऐसे कैसे चपके आया था?
Now that talks highly about your writing skills, because you would know what the media wants at that point.
Yeah. But having said that,
for PR practitioners, it's always a tough call. You have to somewhere balance it. You cannot give them a ready-made article, because a lot of journalists take offense saying, "Why are you doing my work for me?" There are some who really appreciate it, but PR practitioners have to draw a fine line between making a press release and giving them an article that is ready to print.
Exactly. So, while it holds true, but you don't pitch it like that then, You see, ये तो मैंने press release बना के दिया है. It's like a backgrounder. If you have any questions, please do let me know, and I can help you with whatever you want. In most cases, they are again up against deadlines. They have timelines that they need to meet. So if this is what they might just add one line here or there. But, more or less, if you know what, and if you're very clear about what the cause is,
right,
and understand it well, it's very easy to put it across, and this sort of skill actually got honed up a little bit more when I joined the think tank. Because then I was learning about different issues which connected with climate change governance. It was talking about urban issues in terms of urban governance, within the city level governance. It was talking about sustainability, so a lot of different issues that I had to read about to understand. And like you mentioned in my introduction, since I am a research addict, I like to read. So it feeds into this particular habit of mine to write and communicate further. I'm not saying I'm some genie, but if you have those elements in place, a lot of the journalists will be interested in what you're putting out there.
Understood. So, when you shifted from journalism to communication to media advocacy specifically, what was the biggest change that you noticed with your media friends?
With my media friends? Not much, actually. I think because at one particular level, for me, conversation with them was always like, can you, do you think this will make sense? It's more about a collaborative effort,
Right.
Obviously, I also sort of understand where they're coming from. It's the newer set of journalists that you need to sort of develop that kind of relationship with. The older set are people whom I knew, right? And I worked with them in the same field, we've interacted and all of that. But it's the newer set. And if you look at the newer set, a lot of them who've entered journalism have actually entered with the same thought that when we had entered communications, ki kuch change karna hai, zamana badal dena hai, and all of that, They come with a lot of idealistic ideas. So they are very, very happy to engage in a conversation with this,
Which
So
is
yeah, which is very good, but not always works, because as usual as it is with human nature, you get all sorts of apples and oranges and all of that, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Best practices for media advocacy.
Best practices, I would definitely say, keep abreast of what is happening in that particular issue.
Right.
And how is media reporting it? Also keep a tab on which media person is following which particular specific beat. Always keep that in your mind. Somebody who's following education for the last few years has actually developed an understanding of how the processes work, how policies work, and that person could actually be a very good friend for your specific this. Then it comes to crime. If you're specifically focusing on sexual crimes or other, say for instance, if you're specifically focusing on child rights violation issues, you know whom to go to. Also look at how they are developing. One of the best practices that you can also do is try and change the language in how things are reported. And you can see that happening, right? We no longer say someone committed suicide.
Right.
We say death by suicide. Right? That language needs to change. And that has actually happened a lot because of these conversations that are happening continuously with development sector people and the journalists together, right? It takes time, like you mentioned earlier, right? It's a behavioral thing. How do you make people understand that it is important on how you address things, Like for a simple thing, and it still anchors me, is when Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo both won the Nobel Prize, right, for economics. And I wouldn't want to say which media mainstream newspaper, but actually mentioned that Abhijit Banerjee's wife wins the Nobel Prize. Is that how you would want to talk about when you're talking about a Nobel laureate? Do you? Yeah. Doesn't she have her own standing as a person? Somebody's wife. So people are noticing these things. And this conversation is building on and on. So that is one very good practice to correct them. And they're willing to do it if you do it in a very, very collaborative manner. What if you put it like this? And they're mostly willing to understand, and they're willing to grow. They're willing to talk to you. They're willing to understand how did this come about and all of that. And they'll come back to you if a similar issue comes to you. I'm talking about the media. Media will come back to you.
And I think it's very important how you address a particular issue. Those words impact.
Yes, it's very important. The other very good practice to have is to also know the impact of regional newspapers, regional media. It's extremely important, So, and I cannot stress this enough. If your media advocacy team internally has someone who can understand multiple regional languages and is able to communicate in that, then and if you can put out these communications outputs as well as a press release, as a policy brief, trust you me, they are willing to carry this forward. So when we think of, so mostly English mein karte hain and all of that. Why not in Kannada? Why not in Telugu? Why not in Hindi? Why not in Gujarati?
Right.
A lot of audiences are there. So how do you engage with them? So another important, this would be to set aside a budget specifically for translation to ensure that what your cause is about is written in a manner in which the message that you wanted to convey in its whole, and does not get transliterated and does not get, hashed around the way. So it would be very good to have someone who has those skills in your team, or if you have it, then nothing like it.
Brilliant, brilliant. I completely agree. Cannot stress the importance of regional media. Very often we see that brands, organizations get stuck on so-called English media. I think they feel that their elite audience, right, or the funding agencies, or, benefactors would read. While that is important, I think it's very, very essential on the other end as well to reach out to customers, because the kind of reach that regional gives you is phenomenal.
Exactly. Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So,
And it is, and we're willing to talk to you as well, See, because
correct.
if it stems from a very local issue, like ye district mein, in this state mein, ye ho raha hai, they're very interested in talking about it, carrying it ahead, and getting this conversation going. And
Right.
another best practice would definitely be ensure you have your documentation in place, ensure that you have a research team that is getting you the evidence from the ground. It's no longer कि इसके साथ एक case story भेज दो और भेज दो. बस नहीं चलेगा. You need to build
energy,
exactly.
Trying to build a case for them as well. So, while we do all of these programs, how do you judge the effectiveness or impact of a media advocacy program? I think for every PR practitioner, this is like the holy grail, right? You have to measurement impact. And with media advocacy, I think while you look at a regular brand campaign, you can still quantify, qualitatively or quantitatively, you can figure out a way. But when it comes to media advocacy for issues, that's a different ballgame altogether, I think. So how do you go about figuring out the effectiveness or ROI as such of a media campaign?
Okay, very difficult one. I mean, I would love to say you can circumvent the number game. But yes, it is important. It is important to a certain level. Say, for instance, we recently had, for the same example that I gave you, right, for the What If campaign that we had, right? Just on Thursday, we had a Twitter campaign, Twitter chat on that.
Right.
Okay. And for me, personally speaking, it was amazing because for a brief period of time, hashtag What If was trending in India. So, that is one. Yeah. At another level, I can definitely say this whole thing of, our deputy chief minister writing an article because we've spoken and he's seen this happening is another way to measure the effect of this campaign, right? We've put it out there. Right. The very fact that when we put out stuff in social media, we get messages from different organizations saying that can we be partners with you on this campaign? That is another effectiveness that is how we can measure. I'm not saying, I'm not doing away that we also have those Excel sheets ki isme itna hai, isme June mahine mein itne coverages aaye hain. We have right. That. And all of them will happen. But the essential effectiveness of a particular campaign and the cause does not just stay there. It moves ahead. And it's also about building internal capacity. It's very important. I forgot to mention this in the earlier one of best practices. Push your program to write more, to talk more. They will not want to do it, but you need to just push them and say, boss, you are working with the community. You know exactly what they're thinking, and they'll be like, nahin, boss, time nahi hai. For them, it's like, Kang. But the minute you tell them that people are getting impacted with this kind of stories that you are telling, why don't you talk about it? If you just show them that impact, they'll write more. Push them to write, push them to record, push them to talk, podcasts, so many stuff are out there, right? How do you make them do that? Get them involved in the process. It's not your akeli Jan to do it.
That, when PR practitioners are asked to ghostwrite about a particular issue, we are great communicators, right? I might not be so in tune with the issue that you are talking about because you're working at the ground level. Exactly. People are on the ground and talking about it day in and day out. The kind of perspective or the kind of insight that they would bring would be fabulous. I mean, a PR practitioner can, right? If it's a general topic, your 5 favorite colors, the great books that you read, perfectly fine. But when it comes to actually talking about an issue, a PR practitioner can possibly give you a guideline that this is what I need, right? But those words have to come from you. Otherwise, they seem false. And I wish more people or more things, finally get that. I'm glad that you brought up that point.
It is very important actually, and it is also important that we as PR practitioners, and I'm calling myself that as well, because that is essentially what we do. I mean, it's like I said before, it's a semantics thing. It's how do you place that word? How do you do that in a way in which you listen? The idea is to listen, to process it. The idea is not to react, to listen. And that is a skill which probably you and me over a period of time have built, and we have understood the importance of this, which is why, because I have been on both sides. We listen ki ye mera bite hai, ye jayega story mein, ye quote hai, this will come in that, right? When you're talking from a program's point of view at the ground level, you need, if I'm the media advocacy expert for a particular organization, I need to sit and listen to them. Correct. Just draw insights from what is it that they are getting. Because I'm not going onto the field. It's data that they are giving me. I am, capitalizing it, putting it all together in different forms and formats, languages, all of that, and then putting it across as a package. But this knowledge is actually knowledge transferred from someone who's been in the field, has understood the community problems and issues, and has got this to you. You need to ensure that you show that person that much respect. You listen. That is one big quality that each one of us ensure. I mean, as a human being, it would be great if we listen to each other. I'm sure my 8-year-old who's standing out the door would say, "But Amma, you don't listen to me."
Right. I mean, the world will be another place.
Yeah, but definitely, if you listen to their voices, what they have experienced, over a period of time, through issues, through people, and all of that, you'll see that it's a lot of learning for you there. And also suddenly you get an idea that, hey, now can we use this and can we depict this in a particular way? Would this be help in a particular way that could possibly reach out to a different set of an audience? So if this is a data that I got, if I can convert it into get a good design artist to make it into a mind map, and then if I put it on our Instagram, different set of audience that would be interested in this. I actually gave away some of my plans, right?
That's okay. A smart one would catch up on it. So we're running out of time. The last question. Your advice for practitioners who want to get into media advocacy?
Okay. One is, it will be really good if you work from the point of view of either or have some amount of experience as a PR practitioner, okay, in any agency or any or you have worked with a particular organization. It'll be great, because and if you work in both, you're set, because you understand what the media is. You understand what the PR bit of it is, right? Because it is a balancing act, right? You want to ensure that you have that beautiful relationship with the media. You also want to ensure that you are able to put out what messages you have from your cause advocacy, and put it out in a manner that is palatable and acceptable to the media and the greater audience out there. So I think that would be very important.
I would also add one more thing, listening to your conversation today and based on experience, I would say a certain amount of mental resilience is also required to be in media advocacy.
Definitely. Definitely. You need to be, yes, you need to be open to certain things that will trouble you, the story that I told you about, about the female feticide thing, this, I mean, I had a child at that point of time, my daughter was 3. And when I heard of this, it did have an impact on me as a mother, as a human being, forget mother, and as a human being, it does impact you. But then that should actually make firm your resolve to ensuring that this gets attention, this gets the focus that it requires, and it helps you. But you need to be completely mentally resilient to it. and also open to all sorts of experiences. You may not have a very amazingly posh English-speaking person talking to you, but whoever that person is, if that person has been on the field, has amazing and tons of experience that comes from the ground up. You sit down and you listen.
So listening is one of the skills that we will look at, right? So thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us. I think we overshot our time a little bit, quite a bit. But thank you so much. So guys, Varsha will be available to us for the next 1 week. If you have any more questions, you can put them in the comment section below, and she will try her best to answer as much as she can. Yeah, thank you so much, Varsha.
Thank you. Thanks. It was amazing talking to you, Tarun.
So that was Varsha Pillai talking to us about media advocacy in PR. Join us again next week for another episode of All About PR, where we will take a deep dive into another aspect of communication. See you then.